It's the one style that's everywhere, constantly in our daily lives, but usually overlooked in our favorite block game. One of the simplest ways to build, but at the same time incredibly tricky to master. It's the style that you'd think we'd be the most familiar with, but Minecraft says otherwise. That's right folks, it's time to talk about modern builds. What's poppin' guys, it is me Leon with a brand new 7 quick tips video. As you heard just now, today we're going to be tackling a big yet also considerably underused building aesthetic in Minecraft. Modern builds are arguably one of the hardest styles to get right in the Minecraft medium, but if you can pull it off, it looks amazing. So sit back, stay tuned, and enjoy as I break down 7 quick tips for making modern builds in Minecraft. Big shoutouts to Radiant for the video idea. Tip number 1. It's really important to know what blocks work really well in a modern style and which ones don't work as well. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you have to only build with a few different kinds of blocks if you want to use a modern style, because that's just not true. Building aesthetics are a fluid, subjective thing, and there's no one person that can tell you what is modern and what isn't. However, there are definitely some blocks that most people would agree fits into a contemporary house style very well. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking like concrete, bricks, glass, quartz, and lighter, more neutral colored wood planks like oak and birch. Now that's me being pretty conservative with my block choices. Chances are you're gonna want more than what, like 5 options if you're building a house? I'd also include in that list beehives, wool with no color like white, gray, etc., terracotta, andesite, smooth stone, sea lanterns, as well as leaves and dark oak trapdoors for decor. Going online and googling Minecraft modern house, you can find a lot of examples of these geometric, ultra white and clean houses that use a lot of the same blocks that I just mentioned here. And those are really neat. I love houses like this. They're great inspiration. But there are already plenty of house tutorials in that style. Stick around and we'll talk about more realistic houses, interiors, outdoor lawn and garden areas, and a whole bunch of other general useful information. Get comfortable working with white colored blocks. The thing about Minecraft is that it doesn't really lend itself to a modern style. I kinda mentioned this in the intro, but what I really mean is that if you're gonna make a build with the most versatile and common blocks, especially in survival mode, it's not gonna look modern. Wood and stone and all that, that's like a rustic frontier build or even medieval, and is not exactly very modern. So if you're trying to build modern, it's really important to push yourself out of that comfort zone. Sure, wood and stone are great, but chances are your main building block in a modern house is actually gonna be concrete or quartz. Here's an example of a modern starter base I actually made in survival way back in December 2020, way before I started YouTube. It's like all concrete. I could have had a house done much earlier if I just made something out of the jungle wood that's all around my base. But I knew I wanted to use concrete, so I stuck to it and I ended up with this. Maybe you don't want to use just concrete. Maybe it's a little bit too plain for you. That's fine. Don't forget about similar white blocks like quartz, white concrete powder, bone blocks, or even snow. You'd be surprised at how well snow can work in a modern white wall. Once you start building with these white colored blocks, you might get the feeling that your walls are really blank and boring. But don't worry, I've got a solution for that too. Use decoration blocks as pops of color. When you're designing an interior of a contemporary house, try imagining it this way. The walls are like your blank background canvas, and any decorations you add inside are like little accents and pops of color and depth. You're totally right that blank walls lack any sort of interesting depth or color or anything to attract your eye to, but that's where the decorations come in. Here are some of my favorite ways to decorate a modern interior. Check out how the back walls are entirely just white concrete, but we're able to add so much more with these decor elements. What kind of modern house are you really looking for? Different styles work best in different biomes. When I think of a modern house in Minecraft, I mainly think of two things. A, the geometric, ultra-white, and minimalistic houses like the ones we looked at before, and B, some more contemporary houses modeled in the style of a typical American or Western suburb. You know, houses like this. Personally, I usually end up building houses more like this, but that doesn't mean one is better than the other. They both have their positives and negatives. On top of that, I feel like each one feels more at home in different biomes. For example, I think the geometric minimalist houses look best when they're alone amongst lots of trees, running water, and other nature scenery. So something like a mega taiga, jungle, or a spruce forest would be really great. On the other hand, a house modeled off of a typical American suburb feels way more at home in a plains, or a regular old oak forest, a savanna, or maybe even a desert, depending on what part of the country you're most familiar with. You might feel differently than me, so I'd encourage you to experiment with different biomes and really get a feel for what works for you and your build. It's really important to consider the shape and scale of your individual pieces when making a clean, geometric modern build. Let's take another look at this house. If you look at it real closely, it's honestly just a bunch of boxes. But looking at it from a few different angles, you can see that the boxes are arranged in such a way that they're at various heights, different depths, and also different sizes. That's the key here. These kinds of houses are super square and boxy, but if you just make a giant concrete cube or a bunch of squares lined up like a grid, it is unfortunately not going to be a very fun looking house. What I like to do is mess around with different size boxes in different positions until I get something I like. You could prototype it all in white concrete, but an easier way of sketching this out might actually be to use different colored materials to really get an idea of how the boxes interlock with each other. On top of that, consider pushing the boxes into each other a little bit. If they're all just sitting on top of each other, your house might end up looking like a stack of cubes. And as much as we all love cubes, they don't always make for a good modern house. Lawns and gardens are an essential part of any modern suburban house. Moving on over to the other style of modern house that I mentioned back in tip number 4, let's take a look at the exterior of it. A core part of any modern suburban house is the fresh manicured lawn and the beautiful, colorful back garden. So let's make sure to include these elements in our build. You've probably seen this before, whether in real life or in a TV show, but a freshly trimmed lawn often has this weird, stripy, shiny look to it, and we can replicate that in a couple different ways. The main thing that comes to mind is using grass and moss in alternating rows like this, but depending on your biome, the grass color might not work with the moss very well. If that fails, you can always use green concrete and lime terracotta to make a more artificial, astroturfy kind of vibe. As for the garden, try making a raised bed with spruce trapdoors. If you're a small-scale builder like me, you might have to build a bit bigger than you're used to. I've mentioned this before a couple times in previous videos, but I love building small scale. I often find myself keeping houses and other builds on a pretty similar scale to that of the player, 2 blocks tall, cramming in lots of detail into tinier spaces. But this doesn't always fly for a modern build. Chances are, you're gonna need to make walls bigger and taller to really get the feeling of modern spaciousness that we're all looking for. I'd also recommend adding in some sort of baseboard texture at the bottom of your walls. Check out how I'm using brick and quartz in this wall to create a well-defined, colorful bottom texture and a bit of a crown molding on the top that blends into the ceiling. While making this modern suburban house here, I've noticed that I really needed to stretch out the proportions a bit to really get all of the features and geometric details down. So if you run into the same issue, know that there's nothing wrong with that. Alrighty gamers, that is just about all the tips I've got for today. If you're here at the end of the video, thank you for sticking around. I really appreciate it. Also, if you haven't checked out my 1.18 survival series yet, episode 1 just went live a few days ago. It's my first time playing survival Minecraft in almost a year, and I'm going to be taking all the building concepts and ideas that I've talked about in this series and others, and applying them to real in-game creations. It's really been a lot of fun, and I cannot wait to make more. Until next time folks, this has been Leon, and I'll see you all in the next 7 Quick Tips video. Stay cool, my dudes.